I've been in my new home for just over a year now, and as it's a Queenslander style cottage that's probably around about 80 years old, there have been an enormous number of projects that have needed doing. One of them has been really easy to ignore because I can literally just close the doors on it. That's the Euro style laundry. It is an absolute disaster area, but the time has now come for me to seek some inspiration and to get out and do something about it.
Check out your local Bunnings, as many have a kitchen display section and most of that gear is usable in the laundry too. You can design online, in-store by yourself, or with a design specialist. Then just grab what you need straight off the shelf and you're on your way. Time to get the area cleared out, and remember that it's not safe or legal to do fixed electrical or plumbing work yourself. The sink waste pipe will just unscrew, and keep a bucket handy for the spillage. In this case, the water supply is easily turned off and disconnected as they're independent taps. I can't remove the sink and tub stand until I get the tiles out because the back lip of the sink is underneath the tiles.
If your home was built prior to the late 1980s, then chances are you're going to have some products in there that contain asbestos. Asbestos was often used in wall sheeting for wet areas like bathrooms and laundries. If you for a second think you've got asbestos in any part of your home that you're working on, don't just think. You need to call in the experts and get some advice on how you can continue safely with your project.
First cutting at the back of the sink to break the silicone seal, and then I'm using a rubber mallet and a wide rigid scraper to try to get behind the tiles. Even if they don't come off easily, this technique will minimise damage to the plasterboard. If the walls are fibre cement sheet, you may find the tiles lift off easily this way. Larger tiles may need to be cracked to remove them, and always wear gloves and safety glasses when doing this sort of thing. Once they're off the wall, just use a utility knife to tidy the area up and roughly trim it to shape. The sink and tub stand can now be easily moved out of the way. Now I'll repair my plasterboard. You only need simple ready mixed products in small tubs for this, and yes, you can buy repair sized mini sheets of plasterboard. Tidy up the hole to neat angles using a straight edge and a utility knife. Take an accurate measurement of the hole, transfer this to the board, and then use a builder's square and a straight edge to mark and then cut with a utility knife. Always cut away from yourself or stand clear of the cut. Lift the board up and it will break neatly along that score, then use your knife to cut the paper on the other side. Apply a small amount of stud adhesive to the studs, fit the patch panel, and then secure with needle tip screws. Tidy any remaining messy edges with your utility knife and scraper. Cover all the joins with self-adhesive joint tape, folding pieces for the corners, then cover with plaster base coat, pushing well into any gaps. Allow this to set. Tidy up any spots and holes on the wall with a razor scraper and fill with a suitable filler or finishing coat. Then let that set. Now's the perfect time to assemble cabinets. Start with the base panel for the floor cabinet. It's easy to spot with the pre-drilled holes for the leg mounting plates. They go underneath and the finished edge goes at the front. Start with the back panel and run a bead of clear drying adhesive on all joins, and then screw together with your drill set to screw and slow. Don't overdrive the screws. The last piece is the bridging joiner across the front. Cut a piece of cardboard to the size of your cabinet base and the back if needed to create a template, and in situ mark where you need holes for pipes and then transfer this onto your cabinet. Use a hole saw that's larger than the pipes and fittings to drill holes where needed. You can now attach and adjust your cabinet legs. Position the base cabinet and use a small level to check it is sitting level both side to side and front to back, adjusting the legs as needed. Countersink and pre-drill into a wall stud at least 2 points on the side and rear, and then secure with screws at least 50mm long. As the left side will be open, I need a support rail for the bench top. I've cut 65 by 18mm to length for the back, leaving an 18mm gap on the right hand side for the side panel that will go on the cabinet. A long level is used for positioning while I pre-drill. Apply a generous amount of fast grab construction adhesive to the rear and then secure in place. I use 75mm white button head cabinet screws. Cut a rail for the side around 50mm shorter than the countertop will be, and cut a 45° on the bottom front edge. Pre-drill, glue and screw in place with the 75mm screws, and bear in mind that in the corner you may need to drive the screws at an angle to pick up the timber framing. Add the side panel to the outside face of the base cabinet, cutting down if needs be. It needs to be 18mm the thickness of the door, proud of the actual cabinet side panel. Adjust the depth of your pre-drilling bit. On the inside of the cabinet make at least 6 holes and then secure the panel with 25mm screws. All those plaster repairs should now be ready to sand down. If you're tiling over the large patched area, then this level of finish is fine. If the area will be exposed, you'll need to add a layer of skim or fine coat plaster and then sand smooth once dry. It's time for some accurate measurements of the bench top. Measure both back and front and then get ready to cut. Two things to bear in mind when you're cutting material like this. It's really heavy, so you don't want the cut end dropping off. If it does, it'll rip the bit that you're trying to retain. What you need to do is support each end. I've done that on 2 work platforms and then left a gap in the middle. And the other thing is the cleanest cut is always on the undersurface. So plan your cut so that what's underneath will in fact be the top of your bench top. To keep your cut straight, clamp a level in place and use that as a saw guide. Once cut, it's time to work out where the sink is going. Remember, it needs to be on the side where the plumbing is. To mark for your sink cutout, you can use the template in the box, but I use the cardboard packer from the box to find my position. Found the centre of the circle and used a metal rule screwed in place to rotate around and mark the correct circumference. Use the same technique with a tape measure hooked over a screw. Inside the line, drill a hole that will be large enough to allow your jigsaw blade to be positioned to start the cut. To avoid scratching the bench top, tape around the outside of the cutout using painter's masking tape. Fit your jigsaw with a blade that's the right length for the thickness of your bench top and make sure it's suitable for curved cuts. Make sure your timber is firmly clamped and start your cut. Use a medium speed setting to maintain control. Work carefully in one direction and don't force the saw into the wood. Let it cut at its own speed. And a tip on successful circular cutting with a jigsaw: don't push the front of the tool to try and turn it. Swing the rear instead. As you cut, adjust the position of your timber on your stand so that when the cut finishes, the waste section won't fall out, ripping the bench top. Check the sink fit and perfect. Sand the sharp and rough edges of the cut and gently round the edges of what will be the front of your bench top. Decide on the tap location and use a hole saw to drill a suitable sized hole through the bench top. In the rear left corner, I'm also adding a 60mm hole. As my hole saw was a little too shallow for the bench thickness, I started a hole from the top and then finished it from the bottom. As an extra precaution against water penetration, you can apply wet area silicone to the cut edges which may be exposed to water. Run a bead around and then use a flexible blade scraper to firmly push the silicone into the grain. Lightly sand the bench top, wipe off dust, then give it a quick clean with a sugar soap wipe. Prepare your oil and with the recommended painting tools use long straight strokes going with the grain and ensure complete coverage. Don't forget the end grains and edges. Both sides will need 2 coats and sand lightly with a fine sanding pad between coats. Before fitting your bench tops, the ideal time to paint. Towards the top rear of the base cabinet on the side that your washing machine will be, drill through with a 60mm hole saw. To protect the washing machine pipes from wear and for a neater finish, I'm adding cable duct fittings to both sides of the hole. Thoroughly clean the top edge of all the cabinet panels and the support rails. Once the oil is dried on your bench top, drop into place. I found that my sink cutout intruded on the top front rail of the cabinet, so I marked, removed the bench top and used my jigsaw to create a cutout before repositioning the top. Use the supplied angle brackets to secure your bench top in place. Countersink and pre-drill through the top front rail at 3 points and add 3 30mm screws. As I'm centering my tiles to have even cuts on each end, I need to measure and mark the centre of the wall. The area needs to be protected while tiling. This masking tape with attached pull-out drop sheet is perfect. The static in the film makes it cling to even vertical surfaces. You only need very simple products for tiling. Premix is better for the smaller jobs, and make sure you're using a wall adhesive. Glove up and use the notch trowel to apply a generous bed of tile adhesive. Only apply to small areas at a time and keep the bed a consistent thickness. Tile spaces underneath and centre that first tile, pushing firmly into the cement. And for the record, tile spaces stand upright in the gaps. They do not ever lay down flat in the gaps. This is so they can be easily removed once the tile cement is set. To keep tile faces flush and consistent, use a level that crosses at least 3 tiles to press into the bedding cement. Once you reach the top, just use a damp sponge to remove any tile cement that's squeezed out. Measure top and bottom on both sides for your end cuts. For cutting, you can use a traditional score and snap tile cutter or an angle grinder fitted with a diamond blade. If using a grinder, make sure you wear suitable PPE including breathing and eye protection and only cut outdoors. Then fit your tile pieces. Allow the tile cement to dry overnight, then remove the spacers. You'll only need a small box of grout for a job of this size, and I picked grout and silicone in the same product ecosystem so that their colours match perfectly. While wearing gloves and breathing protection, mix up a suitable amount of grout, adding a little water at a time. Aim for a thick consistency that will easily hold on your grouting squeegee. Work over small sections at a time, forcing the grout into the joints. Press firmly and work along and across the joins. Once dry, use a grouting sponge and clean water to remove the excess and then finish with a clean cloth. You can now remove the drop sheeting. To the underside of the lip of the sink, add a bead of quality silicone. Press the sink down firmly into place and then place something heavy such as a bucket of water in the sink and leave standing at least overnight. Use a cloth moistened with methylated spirits to clean off any excess silicone. Now add the wall cabinets. They sit right on top of the tiles. I use those 75mm white button head cabinet screws to secure to the studs in the wall. Once secured, add the side panel onto the wall cabinet. For contrast, and so I don't interfere with the overhead lighting, I'm using an open shelf on the right hand side. I'm securing it with black 50mm round head screws, so I do need to rebate a little from the back of my shelves before I drop them in place. Before adding the silicone seal to the edges, give the tiles a final clean down and polish with a clean cloth and clean water. Mask along the edges where you need to seal with silicone, then add a consistent bead of silicone all the way along. Very lightly mist with methylated spirits and then shape with one pass of a caulking tool. Remove the masking and allow the silicone to cure. Fit the tap and reconnect the waste outlet. It's recommended that you have a plumber inspect and finalise the reconnections before you turn any water on. The base cabinet needs its kickboard, so measure the height from the underside of the cabinet at each end and the length. Cut your kick to suit. Measure with your square from the front edge to the leg support. Adjust the measurement to 10mm shorter and then mark towards each end and the centre of the cabinet base. Position the cut kickboard, countersink and pre-drill at the marked points and secure with 30mm screws. Clean the area with metho or similar and then use the supplied white disc stickers to conceal the screw heads. Cut your shelf out with a jigsaw so it fits around the plumbing, and then so it doesn't bow at the back, put a couple of blocks on the back wall. Slip the washing machine back in, putting the hoses through the cabinet hole as soon as it's close enough. And remember that hole in the back corner of my bench top? My power point is above the bench top, so I put a cable port in the hole, fed the power lead through and plug it in. Now, to sort the cupboard doors out. To keep your handle locations accurate, use a set square to transfer measurements between doors and to make sure your handles are all straight. Measure for screw spacing and then pre-drill. Use snips to cut the screws to an appropriate length. Peel the protective film back in the area of the handles. Position the handle while you push the screws through from behind. Only over hand-tighten handle screws, as overdriving them will damage the door face. Fitting the soft close hinges is simple. First click them apart and the larger section goes in the door itself. Fit the smaller part to the cabinet, screwing in through the larger oval-shaped holes. To fit the doors, click the hinge parts together, then check the door alignment, tighten the screws and add the final screws. Put the shelf in the cupboard and then you can remove the protective film from the doors. The original main doors are tidied up with a quick clean, sand and a couple of coats of paint and then new handles. They can then be rehung and the Euro laundry makeover is complete.
And after this fantastic, functional and budget-friendly makeover, I won't even be embarrassed to leave the doors open to the laundry.